Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is SUKKAH Mem Aleph. We begin 3 lines from the top of the Amud. Says the Gemara, Omar Rab Ashi. This is a continuation of yesterday's Sugya, where we learned about Kedushas Shvius. Not only does the fruit itself have Kedushas Shvius, which means it must be consumed properly, achila, shtiya, etc., within the prescribed time frame, within the Zman Biur, on Shemitah itself. And just as the fruit has Kedusha, it's money. It means the funds received in exchange for that fruit has Kedusha Shvius as well and must be spent properly. Now, how does one go about creating money which has Kedusha Shvius? So we had a machlekes. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it only works derech mekach, by way of exchange, transaction. Take your apple, you exchange it for money. Then that money has Kedusha Shvius. Of course, the original apple also remains Kaddish b'Kedusha Shvius. It's inherently Kaddish. It's a 7th year apple. It can't lose its Kedusha. But the Chiddush that we learned yesterday is that this second item as well acquires Kedusha Shvius and must be consumed properly. Rabbi Yehuda says it only works derech mekach, by way of exchange. So when you take an extra apple, which is Kaddish b'Kedusha Shvius, you exchange it for a pear. That pear has Kedusha Shvius as well because you're basically eating that pear instead of the apple that you had. So you're almost fulfilling, so to speak, the achila of the original apple in this pear. So the pear substitutes for the apple, takes its place. It acquires Kedusha Shvius. But you can't do it derech chilul, by way of direct transferring of Kedusha. That only works by hegdish, which is an acquired Kedusha. But when you have Kedusha Shvius, which is naturally Kaddish, you can't just take that Kedusha and say, I'm going to move it around. I'm going to take that Kedusha and bring it over to something else. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, only derech mekach, by way of transaction, by way of exchange. In which case, you're giving up one item and getting another one in its place. And that's substituting for the first item. And that's almost like a fulfillment of the achila, of the consumption of the first item that you already had. So this has Kedusha of the first item, but not derech chilul. Rabbi Yehuda says either option works. Bein derech mekach, by way of transaction, by way of exchange. Bein derech chilul. Chilul works as well too, by way of transfer. You take your apple and you say, I want the money right here to have the Kedusha of the apple. That also works. Now comes Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi will present another angle to this discussion. Says the Gemara 3 lines from the top. Omar Rav Ashi, machlekes. His whole discussion, meaning Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it only works derech mekach, is only b'Fri Jun, with respect to the original fruit. Aval b'Fri Sheni, but if it's a second fruit, Rashi says, demei shvius, basically means a second generation, a derivative of that original fruit. So it's not the original shvius fruit. It's an exchange. It's something that's substituting for the original fruit. So that's a lower level kedusha. Aval b'Fri Sheni, Divrei HaKoil, all agree. Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree. You can move the kedusha around in whichever way you choose. Bein derech mekach, by way of exchange and purchase and selling. Bein derech chilul, by way of direct transfer. It's only by the original that Rabbi Yehuda says the kedusha will only be extended to its money by way of exchanging, by way of transferring, by way of a transaction. As we explained, the second one is basically substituting for the first one. So you're fulfilling the achila of the first one and the second one. That's the only way to do that. But by way of chilul, it doesn't work. You can't just transfer the kedusha over to the second item. But when it comes to Fri Jun, what's the difference between Fri Jun and Fri Jun? Very simple. Fri Jun is not the original fruit. The kedusha that has been inserted into the Fri Jun, in this case Rashi says, it's the demei shvius. That money isn't originally Kaddish. It's not naturally Kaddish. It acquired Kedusha. It's an applied Kedusha. that kedusha can be moved around with ease. It's like the kedusha of hegdish applied to a chayfetz. That kedusha can be transferred to something else by way of chilul. You don't need to exchange it, to purchase, and to buy and to sell. The kedusha itself can just be transferred to something else. So a person could take this money and say, I want the kedusha in this money to be transferred on my Apple. No transaction, no exchanging, no substitution. That works. So again, Rashi says, when it comes to Fri Jun, the derivative, the second tier, the second generation kedusha, such as money which was received in exchange for Perus Shvius, that's not its own kedusha. It's an applied kedusha, and that kedusha can be moved around simply by way of transferring. Says the Gemara, we had a brayso yesterday which described this fellow taking Perus Shvius, exchanging it for basar, taking the basar, exchanging it for dogim, for yayin, over to etc., etc. And the brayso used the word lokach. He purchased this, he sold that, he purchased this. V'hadik tani lokach. Why did the brayso mention lokach so many times? I understand that with respect to the first fruit, the only way to transfer the kedusha is by way of transaction, Fri Jun. But once you get to the second level, the second generation, the item which was received in exchange for the first item, that's Fri Jun. That kedusha can be moved around and transferred by way of chilul. Why does the brayso mention lokach over and over? You're right, says the Gemara. I did the Tana Resha lokach. It's simply on account of the Resha, because it had to say lokach in the beginning by the Fri Jun. That's the only way to move around the kedusha when you're dealing with the Fri Jun, according to Blazer. Tana nami sefer lokach. On account of that, the brayso just continued the same terminology, kept with the lashon lokach, although it's not really necessary. Once you get to the second level, once you get to the fruit or money received in exchange for the Perus Shvius, that kedusha is an incidental kedusha. It's not inherent. It's not natural. And that kedusha can be transferred by simply being mechalal that kedusha on something else. Esever Ravina Ravashi. He says, I have a kasha on you. How could you say that? Listen to this brayso. It's after. This fellow has a coin which has kedusha shvius. Ubikesh likach lo yichalak. He'd like to purchase a robe. That's problematic, because shvius money is only meant to be used in very specific ways. It's meant to be consumed on shvius, as opposed to buying something durable which will last you past shvius. That's not la'achla, that's l'schoira, Rashi says. So is there any way out? Any solution to this problem? He has money and he needs to buy a robe. Ketzad yasa, what should he do? Says the brayso, we'll give him some good advice. Yerech etzel chemveni, haragel etzlei, should approach the local grocer, the chemveni haragel etzlei, where he's accustomed to shopping. So he's a neighborhood grocer who's gonna help him out. And he tells him, look, tainli b'sela peris. I have this sela, which is shvius, which is kaddish. Please, could you give me some peris of equal value? And he gives it to him. So now the fellow gave him the coin. The chenveni provided him with fruit, which are now kaddish b'kedusha shvius, because they've acquired the kedusha of that money. They've been exchanged for that money. And the chenveni now has money which is no longer kaddish b'kedusha shvius, because that kedusha was transferred to the fruit which was received in exchange for that money. So now the customer turns around to the grocer and he says, look, Harei Peres Halal, look at these fruit here, which are Kaddish, Nusunim Lachab Matana. They're given to you as a gift. Here, take it back. And the Chenveni turns around and says, likewise, Matana, take this coin back, Matana. So now the Peres are Kaddish B'Kedusha Shvius, and the Chenveni must consume them properly, according to the guidelines of Kedusha Shvius. And the customer, the alleged customer, now has a selah which is free of any Kedusha. Now he could take it and use it for whatever he needs, even to buy a robe. So he took his Demei Shvius and removed its Kedusha by way of transaction. So that's the end of the Bryce. Asks the Gemara, Demei Shvius, is that original? No. It's a second generation. It's a derivative of the original fruit. It doesn't have its own Kedusha. It's a Fri Jun. Why does the Bryce insist on removing its Kedusha strictly by way of transaction? Fri Jun doesn't need that, according to Rav Ashi. The Fri Jun, speaking about a Fri Jun, money, the Brisa indicates that the only way to remove that Kedusha is by way of transaction, with that grocer back and forth, the whole wheel and deal. You cannot remove the Kedusha simply by way of transfer. If that were true, then this fellow doesn't need any help from the grocer. Just take that money, which is Kaddish, position some fruit next to that coin and say, look, the Kedusha of this coin, we transfer directly on that fruit. Apparently that doesn't work. The only way to do it is by way of transfer, by way of transaction. Even though it's a Fri Jun, the money isn't the original Kedusha. Says when you write, Elamar Rav Ashi, let me correct things. It's actually lechumra, to be more strict. Machlekes to be Fri Jun. This discussion that we had between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yehuda on how to be machalel, and Rabbi Yehuda maintains that you don't need a transaction, even derech chilul works. That only applies with Fri Jun. By that second level, you have something which was received in exchange for shvius fruit, such as another fruit, such as money. It's an imitation, it's a copy, it's not the original. That Kedusha isn't internal, it's not inherent. And there Rabbi Yehuda maintains you could transfer the Kedusha by way of chilul. It's similar to the Kedusha's Hegdish, which can move around at ease. Aval be'Fri Rishon divrei hakoil derech mekachin derech chilulay. But when it comes to the original fruit, which is internally Kaddish, it's inherently Kaddish. All agree, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree, you can't just transfer its Kedusha. The only way to affect Kedusha on something else is by way of transaction. As explained earlier, you take that fruit and you exchange it for something else, so you're fulfilling, so to speak, the achila, the consumption, the dinam of the first fruit in the second fruit that you've now received in exchange. So it's tit for tat, it's a substitution. But you can't just take the Kedusha and remove it, Kedusha and transfer it, you can't do that. So bottom line, Rav Ashi says, the Fri Rishon is so kaddish that nothing can be done unless it's derech mekach. Says the Gemara, we had another brayse yesterday, which seems to indicate otherwise. We had a brayse which spoke about shvius or maser sheni, where the kedusha is going to be transferred onto animals. The question was live animals, shachat animals, as we discussed yesterday. In any case, what do we see? That you can actually be machalel, you can directly transfer the kedusha from the shvius fruit. The Gemara is assuming that shvius is describing shvius fruit, maser sheni describing maser sheni fruit. So that's the original kedusha, which allows transfer. That's a kasha on Rav Ashi, who says there is no one who allows transfer from the original fruit if it's not derech mekach. Says the Gemara, it's incorrect. My shvius to my shvius. Shvius is not the original fruit. We're speaking about monies received in exchange for shvius fruit. That's Fri Jun. That's the second generation kedusha. That allows chilul. Dili timehachi. Because if you want to agree with me, then when the Brisa spoke about maser mamish, that the original maser fruit, and you're going to transfer the kedusha onto an animal, you certainly can't do that. Torah says, take the money in your hands, meaning the kedusha of the maser sheni fruit must be transferred strictly on money. You can't do it on an animal. So you must say, Ella Dmei Maser. We're not speaking about the original Maser Sheni. We're speaking about something received in exchange from Maser Sheni. Monies received in exchange. Money which acquired the Kedusha of Maser Sheni. Hachanami Dmei Shvius. Likewise, when we discuss Shvius, we're not speaking about the original Shvius fruit, which wouldn't allow for Chilul. It's the original Kedusha. You can't just be Machal. You can't just transfer Kedusha. You can't just extend its Kedusha to its money. It has to be exchanged by transaction. We're speaking about Dmei Shvius. Second generation Kedusha Shvius. Money is received in exchange for the original fruit. That's a more lenient form of Kedusha Shvius, and that allows for transfer by way of Chilul, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so at the end of the day, the conclusion was that Rav Ashi is actually being machmer. This machlokes between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yehuda only applies to a pri sheni, such as fruit received in exchange for your shvius fruit. Money is received in exchange for your shvius fruit. That's an acquired kedusha. That's an applied kedusha. That's not the original. Over here, Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what? Let's compare it to an hegdish item, which acquired kedusha. It's an applied kedusha and can be moved around at ease, even via direct transfer. You don't need a transaction. You don't need exchange. But when it comes to the original shvius fruit, all agree. The only way to extend its kedusha to its monies, to the Dmei Shvius, is only by way of transaction. You exchange this for that, so that takes this place. That is coming to substitute for the original fruit. Now, of course, the original fruit always remains kaddish. We discussed this yesterday. But since I received this in exchange for that, by me it's as though I'm fulfilling the original achila. The dinim of consumption apply to the first item, which I no longer have. I'm applying that to the second item, which I received in exchange. So that works. Derech mekach tafka. Continues the Mishnah. Bari Shaina. Initially, the olden days, when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, Hayalulav nital b'mikdash shiva. In the Mikdash, they would take the lulav all throughout the 7 days of Sukkot. The pasuk says, and then it says, Usmachtem elfnei Hashem shivas yamim, which indicates that you want to take the lulav throughout all 7 days of Sukkot if you're in the Mikdash. Uba Medina, but outside the Mikdash, merely yom echad, only on the first day. This is when the Beis HaMikdash was standing. But Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, after the destruction of the Mikdash, Hiskin Rabbi Yehuda ben Zakkai, Sheyeh lulav nital b'Medina shiva zeichel HaMikdash. He was Masak, and he established a minhag that you would take the lulav even outside the Mikdash, even outside Yerushalayim, for 7 days, as a remembrance for what transpired during the time of the Mikdash, to generate longing and yearning to the Beis HaMikdash. That's number one. He was masak another takana. V'sheyeh yom hanef kuli aser, at the yom hanef, the yom of Tnufa, referring to the 16th day of Nisan, where they would bring the minchas ha'omer, which would actually change the status of the new grains. Up until that point, you couldn't consume the new crop, the new grain. Can't eat chadash before the omer, but after the omer was brought, now all new grains were mutar ba'achila. So that was during the Mikdash. But after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, he was masakin that the entire day was aser. Chadash can only be eaten the following day, on the 17th of Nisan. Let's go over to Rashi, about 4 or 5 lines down. It says Rashi mas Nisan. So initially, the lulav was taken by Mikdash Shiva, Kid Darshinim, Teres Koinim. Pasuk says, Mismachtem v'fnei Hashem l'kechem shivas yomim. So v'fnei Hashem, in the Mikdash, you take it for 7 days. V'loi b'gvulin zayin yom, as opposed to the gvulin outside the Mikdash, there's no mitzvah to take the lulav for 7 days. So only in the Mikdash was it 7, but in Medina, Rashi says, B'Yushalayim, she'afu k'gvulim. anyway outside the Mikdash, including Yerushalayim, that's also called Gvulim. You can only take it the first day. Interesting that the Rambam and Pirush HaMishnah many times in Maser Sheni and Shkolav over here and Shoshana maintains that even Yerushalayim is considered Mikdash as far as these halachas are concerned. Now the question is, nowadays, some people are noyeg to actually go to the Kaisel area to shake lulav on Sukkot. Why? What's the point of doing that? Because nowadays, throughout Sukkot, other than the first day, throughout Sukkot, it's only midrabanan. And it's certainly preferred to be Mekayim the mitzvah min Torah. And if we hold like the Rambam, it's not clear, but if we follow the Rambam that the entire Yerushalayim is considered mokim of Migdash with respect to the halacha of lulav, then you're Mekayim a mitzvah min Torah all throughout Sukkot. Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal used to do that. He used to go every morning to the Kaisel area, shake lulav, to be Mekayim the mitzvah min Torah. V'smachtem l'fnei Hashem l'kechem shivas yomim. Now, not everybody does this. There's a lot of tzdadim that would not require this. Firstly, who says that halacha is like the Rambam? Rashi clearly learns that Migdash in this case is only the actual base of Migdash, not Yerushalayim. He says Yerushalayim is Gevulim. So there's no milah, there's no advantage in shaking the lulav in Yerushalayim if you're not in the actual the Azara or the Chassam Sofer says even the Harabayis. But here you're outside everything. That's one thing. And also, some say that once you shake the lulav outside and you're yaitzi, even if it's only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, there's no need to repeat again. There's no point in repeating again. So if you were yaitzi outside Yerushalayim, there's really no gain, perhaps, in coming back and shaking again at the coastal area. Rabbi Yashiv used to actually come in the morning and do the bracha, the initial netilas lulav at the coastal, so to cover this possibility. Interesting Indian. Continues Rashi. The second takana was Shehei Yom Hanef. Yom Hanef shel Omer, a day where they will be meinef to Omer, the Aina to Zayin ben Nisan. Kuli Aser b'Chadash. You have to refrain from eating Chadash throughout the entire day. U'ba'od HaMikdash Kayam, when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, then the halacha was different. Mishakarav Omer, Hayochen Chadash b'Biyayim. Once the Omer was brought, you can start eating Chadash. The pasuk says like this. Let me read the entire pasuk. It says you must refrain from eating the Chadash. Ad havi achem es omer atnufa, right? And first the pasuk says, Ad etzem hayom hazeh. So it goes like this: V'lechem v'koli v'charma lo yisochlu. Meant to refrain from eating the new crop of grain. Ad etzem hayom hazeh, until the actual day. Which day? Tazayin ben Nisan. And the pasuk continues, Ad havi achem es omer atnufa. Ad havi achem es korban elekechem. Right? So what does that tell you? That when you're going to bring the carbon, meaning when the Beis HaMikdash is standing, the Isser only extends until that point. Says Rashi. But once the bayis was charav, there's no need to wait. As long as the 16th day of Nisan dawns on you, as long as you have Heir Mizrach, sunrise, you're mutter. Once the sun begins rising in the east, on one hand we have the pasuk which says up until this day, so Chadash is us up until that day. What does that mean? The Hainu Heira Mizrach. As soon as you have sunrise, you don't need to wait any more than that. We have another pasuk which says you have to wait until the Omer is brought. Ad Aviyachem. How does this work? Beginning of the day, or you have to wait further until you bring the mincha. Haketzad. Bizman deka Omer Ad Aviyachem. Yeah, when the Beis HaMikdash is around and there's an Omer to be brought, wait until the Omer is brought. Or bizman deka Omer, when there's no Omer. If the Churban HaMikdash, Ad Etzem. You have to wait until the day comes. That's it. Once the 16th day arrives, you're mutter. That's minadin. Comes Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai and says, no. Va'asar Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai aleim kol hayom. You have to refrain the entire day. The 16th day of Nisan is off limits. Why? Because the Farish time of the Gemara, as the Gemara will elaborate further. So two halachas, two takanis. Firstly, take the lulav all throughout Sukkot, even though you're outside the Mikdash. Number two, refrain from Chadash all throughout that 16th day of Nisan. Continues the Gemara. How would you know that you meant to establish a zecher, a remembrance, for what transpired in the Mikdash, such as taking the lulav all throughout Sukkot as a zecher? How do you know that? Maybe you're not meant to do that. Perhaps it's Bal Tois if you're adding to the mitzvah min ha-Torah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, we have a pasuk. I'm going to heal your wounds. Referring to Yerushalayim, they consider you rejected. There's nobody that cares, nobody that misses Yerushalayim, nobody that longs, nobody that yearns. We learn Dorish Ein La. There's something wrong, that nobody was yearning for it, nobody was missing it. Apparently that is in place. Establish a minig, a custom which evokes feelings of longing and yearning, such as continuing to shake your lulav throughout Sukkot in the same manner that it was done in the Beis HaMikdash. This will refresh the concept of the Mikdash in your minds and create that longing for those days of old. Next thing he was misaken was, what's the reason for that? As Rashi explained, technically, once sunrise arrives, once the 16th day dawns on you, you're mutter. My time, we hope that very speedily the Beis HaMikdash will be built. What's going to happen then? Things are going to change, because now you have to wait for the Omer to be brought in order to eat Chadash. This halacha that the 16th day itself is mutter, that's only when there's no Omer. A Heira Mizrach is matter, sunrise is matter. But when you have a Omer, when you have a Mikdash, Ad Havayachem. So, if you're accustomed to eating your Chadash as soon as the 16th day dawns on you, what happens when the Mikdash is built? People won't differentiate. They'll say, V'yayimru ishtakat, last year. Take a look. Last year what happened? Milo yachalnu beheir mizrach. Haven't we partaken in Chadash crop as soon as we saw the sunrise? As soon as the 16th day dawned? Hashti naminechel. Okay, now as well. We'll continue and with that habit. They won't differentiate. They won't discern that there's a difference. There's shtakad lo have Beis HaMikdash. Last year there was no Mikdash. Yeah, you're right. Heir, Mizrach, Hitter. As soon as the 16th day arrived, they're mutter. Now it's different. Baruch Hashem, we have a Mikdash. Hashta dike Beis HaMikdash. It's very different. Omer matter. You need the Omer to be matter. So not to avoid confusion, Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai decided better to have it established consistently. Have the 16th day Asr in order to avoid any confusion. Says Gemara, what's your concern? The Ivni Emas. You're concerned about what? That the Beis HaMikdash will be built when? What time? What day? Ilim with the Ivni B'Shitzer, say it was built on the 16th day of Nisan. That wouldn't pose a concern, even if they continue their practice. Even they'll eat Chadash that day. It's mutter. Harei Hitter Heir Mizrach. Once it got light, once the 16th day arrived with no Beis HaMikdash, at that point the Chadash is mutter. Just because the Mikdash was built in the middle of that day, it doesn't change things. It doesn't make it usher retroactively. Once it was mutter, it remains mutter. So why are you concerned about confusion, about Isser? Ela de Ivni B'Chameser. Oh, perhaps you're concerned about the possibility of the Mikdash being built on the 15th day, or the 14th, or the 13th day of Nisan. In which case, come the 16th day, it's not automatically mutter. You have to wait for the Omer, right? Okay, fine. Granted, but you still don't have to apply an Isser to the entire day. How long does it take for them to be makar the Omer? At most, up until Chatzos. Right? They wouldn't delay, they wouldn't procrastinate past that point. So even if there's a Mikdash, even if you have to wait for the Omer, at most you have to wait until Chatzos. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda should not have applied an Isser to the entire day, just in case there's a Mikdash, in which case they have to wait for the Omer. apply the Isser until Chatzos. But after it's certainly, rest assured that there's a carbon brought. Mechatzos hayoyim v'halon tishteri. Past Chatzos it should be mutter. Dotzanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, the Omer was typically taken care of before Chatzos. So even if there's a Mikdash, even if there's an Omer, at most you have to wait until Chatzos. So past Chatzos is never concerned. It should never have been answered. Dotzanan, haruchaykim mutarim. The ones that live at a distance from Yerushalayim, they don't necessarily know exactly when the Kohanim brought the Omer. So how would they know when to begin eating the Chadash? Haruchaykim mutarim mechatzos hayom alahalan. Past Chatzos, that's certainly mutter. Why? The Vishain Bezin, Miss Aslan, but we know that the Bezin in charge of the Kohanim and of the Karbanis won't dilly-dally, they won't procrastinate, they'll make sure that the Omer was brought by the time Chatzos comes around. That's a given, that's a fact. So why are you concerned past Chatzos? Lo Yitzricha, we must be speaking about a different concern. If we allow eating Chadash on the 16th day, perhaps there'll be a Binyan Beis HaMikdash this year, which will be built when? We built in a manner which won't allow them to bring their Omer before Chatzos. And they might get delayed and end up bringing the Omer later on in the day, in which case the whole day is technically also. So on account of that remote possibility, Rabbi Yehuda says, don't eat Chadash, even after the destruction of Mikdash, don't eat Chadash throughout the entire day. Like Tzricha Divni Belelia, perhaps it was built at night, between the 15th and the 16th. Inami, or maybe Samach L'Shkia Sachama, on the 15th, very close to Shkia. So it's pretty much the same case. The point is that you won't have enough time to prepare your Omer. By the time they get around to it, it's going to be late in the day. Late in the 16th of Nisan. So on account of that remote chashash, Rabbi Yehuda Kessler established the halacha, never have Chadash throughout the entire 16th day. Let's go down to Rashi, 7 lines from the bottom. Says Rashi, what's the concern? Concern that the Mikdash will be built at night. They won't have ample time to cut the grain for the Omer until close to morning. There's a lot to do. It's a long process. They would first dry it and roast it, pile it up so that the moisture drips out. Then they grind it, special grinder. Sift it 13 times. Different types of sifters, coarse, fine. As the Mishnahs describe. So it's a long process. Have to begin only close to morning on the 16th. It's going to take all day. In this case, they couldn't start the process. Beginning of the night, the way they usually do. It stretched until morning, because there was a Binyan Beis HaMikdash taking place throughout the night. They won't get around to taking care of it before Chatzos. Inami, another option, perhaps the Mikdash will be built on the 15th, close to Shkia, but it's pretty close to the previous case. Tosfos actually learns that the second scenario of Chamesa, of Samach L'Shkia Sachama, is actually not speaking about the 15th, speaking about Erev Yom Tov, close to Shkia, means so close to Yom Tov, which won't allow them enough time to go scout, to look around for fresh grain, to get the tools ready. So they're going to be short on time. They're going to have to start that whole process Matzah Yom Tov. By the time they get around to doing the Omer, it's going to be late in the day on the 16th, and that's the concern. Asks Rashi a kasha. It's a famous Rashi. Vi kasha. What about the following kasha? The Belayla Eilan Nivna. We know that Beis HaMikdash won't be built at night. The Kaimel Mishvos, the Ein Binyan Beis HaMikdash Belayla. Dichsiv Ubayayim Hakem. How could you say that it's going to be built at night? That's number one. Nor will it be built on Yom Tov itself. The Kaimel Mishvos, the Ein Binyan Beis HaMikdash Deichi Yom Tov. You can't build a Mikdash on Yom Tov. So what's the concern in the Gemara? Answers Rashi. Which Mikdash are we speaking about? The third Beis HaMikdash? That's different. Hanamili Binyan Habonim B'dei Adam. A Beis HaMikdash built manually by Adam can't be done on Yom Tov, nor by night. Aval Mikdash Ha'asid She'anu Mitzhapen. The future Beis HaMikdash That's different. Bonoi umeshuchlal hu yigola v'yavim mishamayim. It's going to come down as a ready built structure from Shamayim. Hashem will take care of it for us. That can happen even at night, even on Yom Tov. Shenemar Migdash Hashem Kun Yodech Hashem, you will build the Beis Hamikdash. Interesting kasha, because the Rambam Hilchos Malachim seems to say that the Beis Hamikdash L'Asad Lavi will be built by Mashiach, so it is a Bigdash B'dei Adam. It's actually going out of Gemara. So the Aruch LaNer actually learns that perhaps there are two aspects to the Mikdash. There's a physical aspect, which is Bidei Adam. But that's not what we're speaking about here. We're speaking about the second element, the spiritual element, the life of the Beis HaMikdash, which will come down, Min HaShamayim. So there's a corresponding Mikdash, a spiritual structure, corresponding to a physical structure down here, which has to come down. That gives it its life, its Kedusha. And that might come down at night, might come down on Yom Tov. In which case, now it changed the whole equation. We have a Mikdash here. We have to bring an Eimer. It's going to get delayed until late in the day. Therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, refrain from Chodesh throughout that 16th day of Nisan, just in case we end up with a situation where Chodesh will be also throughout the 16th. That's the first approach in the Gemara. He was concerned about this type of situation, and therefore he said, Midrabanan, don't eat any Chodesh throughout the 16th day of Nisan, even throughout the Golus days. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar continues the Gemara 3 lines from the bottom. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Amar, I have another approach to things. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai b'shitas Rabbi Yehuda Amra. This takana is based on Rabbi Yehuda. It's in line with Rabbi Yehuda's shita. The Amar min ha'Torah aser. Unlike the previous Gemara, where we learned that there's a difference between when there is a Mikdash, in which case you have to wait for the Eimer to be brought, and when there's no Mikdash, when we say, the Etzem Yimazeh, it's only us up until, not including the 16th. And Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai merely applied Gzerim D'Rabbanan to avoid confusion, concerned about some remote possibility. So it's only D'Rabbanan. According to this approach, it's Min HaTorah. This is consistent with Rabbi Yehuda, who was Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai's Talmud down the line, and we see that Rabbi Yehuda held that Min HaTorah, even when there's no Mikdash, you may not have your Chodesh throughout the entire 16th day of Nisan. Davar Min HaTorah asa d'chsiv ad etzem hayom hazeh ad yitzumei shel yom, until the actual day, because Savar, and he holds ad, when the Torah says ad etzem hayom hazeh, doesn't mean until and not including. No, ad ve'ad b'chlal, and including the 16th. So when there is a Mikdash, it's Eimer dependent. When there's no Mikdash, the entire day is Asa. That's all Rabbi Yehuda was telling us. He meant to know Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, refrain from Chodesh the entire day. So according to this approach, it's Min HaTorah. It's not Gzeira D'Rabbanan. It's Asa Min HaTorah. Says the Gemara, how could that be? Umi Savar Likavasei? Can you say that Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai was on the same track as Rabbi Yehuda? That the entire day is Asa Min HaTorah? From Miflu Palgal, we find that Rabbi Yehuda is actually in disagreement with Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai. This non Mishachar Beis HaMikdash. Hiskin Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai. Shehei Yom Neif Kuli Asa. So after the Churban, Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai was Misakin. Atakana. 16th day of Nisan, there was an Isser for Chodesh. Amar loy, without the loy, because they actually lived much later. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, v'lo min HaTorah asa. It's a new takana that you're introducing. Min HaTorah, you must refrain from Chodesh throughout the 16th day, even when there's no Mikdash. T'chsiv ad etzem hayom hazeh, which tells us ad yitzumei shel yom, until the entire day is past you. So it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai was in disagreement. He was introducing it in the Rabbanan. Answers the Gemara, no, Rabbi Yehuda, Huda Katay, Rabbi Yehuda misunderstood Rabbi Yehuda Zakkai. Who saw him in the Rabbanan Kamar? Rabbi Yehuda figured that Rabbi Yehuda was introducing his own Gzeira D'Rabbanan. No, V'loi, it's not so Midaraisa Kamar. He was merely clarifying a Din Torah. V'iskin Kamar. So why does it say Rabbi Yehuda was Masakin? It wasn't Masakin, he was just teaching halacha. My Hiskin, what does that mean, Hiskin? Darash, Hiskin. He simply explored and expounded on that drash, on that pasuk. That ad etzem hayom hazeh means ad b'chlal, including the 16th. That's all he was trying to say. V'hiskin, and he establish the Issa, because you see, up until that point, during the Zman HaMikdash, they waited for the Omer and no more. Comes Rabbi Yechon and says, Rabbi Yisai, things changed today. Unfortunately, after the Churban, we go back to the Pasuk, which says, Ada Yetzam Mazeh, which tells us the entire day is Asr. That's what it means. He had to be Masak, and he had to establish the halach and clarify it. But of course, it's Menat Torah. Because Ad Etzam Mazeh means the entire day. Okay, let's make a quick chazara. So there's a din to refrain from eating chadash. Until when? Pasuk says, Ad etzem mazeh, ad haviachem es korban alekechem, which seems to be a contradiction. Until the day, and then it says, no, until you bring the korban. How does this work? Well, it depends at what point in history. Bizman HaMikdash, it works according to the Omer. The ones who live far away, rest assured, chatzos onward is mutter. When there's no Mikdash. Oh, here have a machlekes. According to Shitz Chachamim, Heir Mizrach is the matter. They hold Ad Etzem Mazeh means up until, not including the day of the 16th. Rabbi Yehuda learns the entire day is Asr Menat Torah. Ad Etzem means Ad V'Ad B'chlal, including the day. When Rabbi Yehuda came along and made a takana to refrain from Chadash the entire day, what do you have in mind? Oh, so it depends according to whose Shita was speaking. We have two approaches in the Gemara. Approach one is that Rabbi Yehuda following Shittas Chachamim. Here, Mizrach is really matir. But he said, no. Keep away the entire day, in a manner where they'll bring the Omer very late, right? They'll build it at night, on Yom, and at that point, people might get confused. They'll keep to their habits of eating the Chadash the entire day. No. He says, in order to avoid confusion, the entire day is Asr. This way, it's going to eliminate any mistakes. Second approach in the Gemara was, Rabbi Yechon was following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. The entire day is Asr Menat Torah. That's all he's trying to say. During the Mikdash, Omer is matir, but after the Mikdash, we revert back to the pasuk about Etzem Mazeh. The entire 16th day is Asr B'Chadash. Says the Mishnah, Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, the first day of Sukkot, Shechal Yos B'Shabbos, which happens to fall on Shabbos. On the first day, you have to actually take your own lulav. You can't carry it on Shabbos. So what would they do? The entire community, they would bring their lulav to the shul before Shabbos. The next morning, Shabbos, they would come along. So every person takes a look and discerns and recognizes his personal lulav, and takes it for his mitzvah. Why? Chacham taught us that the first day is different than the rest of Sukkot. The only way you can be yotzi your mitzvah on the first day is if it's your own. You can't be yotzi b'lulav shel chaver. It says lochem. You have to make sure it's yours. Ushar yimoi sachag, as opposed to the rest of the days of Sukkot. Adam yotzi dechevasai b'lulav shel chaver. You can be yotzi with your friend's lulav. Now, when we speak about taking the lulav on the first day, which you don't do today, that was during the Zman of the Mikdash, when they knew with certainty that their calendar was on track, and then they took it even on the first day. Today we don't do that anymore. Concludes the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Omer, interesting halach. Yom Tov Harishon Shechad, Shechal Yis B'Shabbos. Suppose the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. V'shachach. He got so excited about the mitzvah, he forgot. V'hitzis halul v'shus rab. And he actually carried the lulav outside with him. Potter, he doesn't have to bring a chatas. Why? Because he carried out Bereshus mitzvah, meaning he was preoccupied and overwhelmed by the mitzvah. Rabbi Yossi holds when he's toya b'dvar mitzvah, he's potter from korban. So Mishnah told us on the first day of Sukkot, you have to take your lulav. Minan amili. How do we know that? Tana Rabbana. We learned in the Brisa. It says lokachtem lochem. We learn from here. Lokachtem shedehei lekicha b'yad kol echad ve'echad. Meaning, Bezdin can't be moitzi the entire community. It's a personal chiv. That's why it says lokachtem. Lashon Rabbim. Every person has to take a lulav. From the word lochem we learn, Misha lochem has to belong to you. Lohoitzi is a shol as opposed to a borrowed lulav, as a gadol or a stolen lulav. We can honor chacham based on this pasuk. Chacham tell us, Ein adam yotzei yidei chevasei b'yom tov harishon shel chag One may not be Yetze. His mitzvah's lulav on the first day of Yom Tov, bilu lavish al chaver, using his friend's lulav. Ella im kain nasnoi lo b'matana, unless his friend was gracious enough to grant it to him as a gift. You can do that. In fact, it was a story. Umasa, it was a story involving Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Lazar Nazai, Rabbi Kiva. Shibam Besfina, they're traveling on a ship. And it was SUKKAH, the first day. The only one who had a lulav was Rabbi Gamliel. Shalachai be'elav zuz, which he purchased for 1,000 zuz. So what did they do? So first, Noklai Rabbi Gamliel v'yatzabay. Rabbi Gamliel shook it, he was yaitz his mitzvah. V'nosnai Rabbi Shua b'matana, and he granted it to Rabbi Shua b'matana. Noklai Rabbi Shua v'yatzabay. Rabbi Shua took it and was yaitz it. So after Rabbi Shua was v'yatzabay, nos v'nosnai Rabbi Lazar Nazai matana. Rabbi gave it over to Rabbi Shua, gave it to Lazar Nazai as a gift. Not like Lazar Nazai. V'yatzavay. He as well took it and he was yaitzi. V'nosnei matana l'Rabbi Akiva. He gave it b'matana to Rabbi Akiva. The last one on the list. Netalai Rabbi Akiva v'yatzavay. Rabbi Akiva takes it and he's yaitzi. What did he do afterwards? V'yachziroi l'Rabbi Gamliel. He gave it back to Rabbi Gamliel. So we see that you can be yaitzi even b'matana. Now, lama li lemeimar hechziroi. Why does the Brisa, the Mishnah, bother to say that he returned it to Rabbi Gamliel? Is there any halacha that we derive from that? It says more, yes. Mulsa agav urche kamashmal. By way of discussion, the Mishnah is teaching us a halacha that matana al manas lahachzir shma matana. If you give a matana on condition that it has to be returned to you, that's considered a matana. As long as he has it, it's his. It's mamish his. And when he gives it back to you, you have to reacquire it. You have to make a new kinyan. As Rava tells us, hey, look, look, take a look. I have an esrog. You want to have it? Want to be yaitze with it? Take it as a gift. Al manas, on condition shetachzireu li. They return it to me. So I'm giving it to you conditional. It's a conditional matana. Not like yatzabay. So this fellow takes it. He's yaitze his mitzvah with it. Is he really yaitze? Oh, it depends. If he actually fulfills the condition, keeps his word, he gives it back to the original owner, then he's yaitze. It turns out that it was really his because he was mekayim the condition. But if he fails to return it, then he's a gazlan. He didn't keep his word. It was never given to him as a gift. And therefore, lo yatsa. Continues the Gemara, why does the Mishnah bother saying that Rabbi Gamliel purchased a lulav for 1,000 zuz? To inform you, kama mitzvahs chavivas aleim, how dear mitzvahs were to them. It's interesting that the Chavetz Chaim writes that you don't have to pay an exorbitant fee for your mitzvahs. So a person is only chayiv in Arba Minim if they're being sold at fair value, market price. But if there's extortion taking place, there's no chayiv, pater from the mitzvah. Rabbi Gamliel took exception. He paid even 1,000 zuz. And it shows the chavivas. He went beyond the call of duty. Kama mitzvahs chavivas alein. Amalei Mar bar Ameimar l'Ravashi. Mar, the son of Ameimar, tells Ravashi, Abba, my father, meaning Ameimar, tzului kamasli bey. He would actually hold the lulav while he was davening. Rashi says this was an expression of dearness, of chiba, to the mitzvah lulav. He would hold on to it all the time. Meisvei says we have a brayso which indicates that you're not meant to do that. Lo yeches adam tefillin biyadai. One may not hold on to tefillin v'sefer Torah b'chek or to sefer Torah v'yispal during tefillin because it creates a distraction. Difficult to concentrate when you're holding on to a sefer Torah tefillin and you're concerned about dropping it. Nor should tend to his meirag line because it might spray on the tefillin and the sefer Torah. While he's holding to the tefillin or the sefer Torah, he might not engage in any type of sleeping, a deep sleep, a light nap, because he might drop these items. Shmuel added more to the list. Not only Dvarim Shebekdusha, which presented real concern in his mind, even other things. Sakin, a sharp knife, which you might drop while he's davening. It's going to distract his kavanah. Ukara, a bowl full of something. kikar, a loaf of bread, umois, coins, hara'il kiyotzim, that same halacha. Never to hold on to these items during tefillah. They're disruptive. So how can we say that Mareimar will hold his lulav during tefillah? Says the Gemara, Hasam lav mitzvah nino, v'taradbu. A lulav is very different than those items which are non-mitzvah items, which distract him. Distract his kavanah. He has to hold on to them. It's like a burden. It's like a mouse. It's disruptive. As opposed to the lulav, hacha mitzvah nino. It's a mitzvah. It's not going to distract him. The chavivas ha-mitzvah is so dear to him. It's so chaviv to him that it's not going to be matrid. It's not going to distract him. It's not going to interfere with his kavanah. Ask the ritva, just the opposite. Advar mitzvah. You have to pay more attention to Advar mitzvah. Of course it's going to take away from his concentration. Says the ritva, no. What Rashi meant to say is that since the lulav is a spiritual entity, it's going to only do him good. It's only going to enhance his tefillah experience. It's going to generate more avas Hashem, more ruchnias. So it's not going to take away. It's going to add enthusiasm and excitement. It's like min b'mino y'enei choytitz. They're both mitzvahs. It's not going to interfere. They're going to feed off each other. It's going to enhance his tefillah experience. So since holding on to the lulav is part of mitzvah's lulav, as we're going to see soon, the Anshe Yerushalayim would keep their lulav in their hands the entire day. So this is an enhancement of the mitzvah's lulav. It only adds and enhances his tefillah. Tanya, as we find in the following brayso, Reb Lezer b'Tzedek Omer, Kach hayim hagan shel Anshe Yerushalayim. In fact, this was the minig of the people in Yerushalayim. Adam yotzim beise, his fellow leaves his home, v'lulav biyadeh, with his lulav still in his hand. Hoylech lebeis hakneses, he goes to shul, v'lulav biyadeh, he's holding his lulav. Koyre kriyishma mispalel, even during Krishma and Tefillah, v'lulav biyadeh, he's holding on to his lulav. Koyre b'Torah, when he gets to reading the Torah, he has to actually roll the Torah back and forth, he has to open, close, or v'noisias kapav, if he's a kohen, he has to do nesias kapayim, brichas kahan. Then he has no choice. Manichei el gabekak, he has to place his lulav down. Hoylech l'bakir cholim, he proceeds to be mavakir cholim. U'nacham avelim, proceeds to nichem avelim. Lulav biyadeh, he's still clutching his lulav. Nichas l'beis ha-medrash. When he gets to the beis ha-medrash, Rashi says on the bottom line, Nichas l'beis ha-medrash, Torah d'shmat, he's going to get preoccupied with learning people. He might absentmindedly drop that lulav. Now it's time to let go. Says the Gemara on the second line from the bottom. Nichas beis hamedrash mishaged lulav b'yad bnoi. So he sends his lulav with his son, b'yad avdei, with his servant, b'yad shlucha, with his emissary, sends it home. My kamashman. What's the point of this brayso? L'diacha, to show you kama yuzrizim b'mitzvahs. Look how meticulous, how eager they were to be mekayim the mitzvahs lulav properly. They'll keep it with them the entire day. And once again, we see that it wasn't considered an interference with Krishma, with tefillah. That's a mitzvah. This is a mitzvah. They feed off each other. You only end up gaining. Okay, let's do a brief chazara of today's highlights. We started with doing the chilul of kedusha shvius onto money, onto other fruit. So Rav Ashi's conclusion was, when it comes to the original fruit, the Fri Jun, it can only affect change through mekach, through exchange, through transaction. When it comes to the Fri Sheni, which is the second generation, the food or money received in exchange for that original fruit, that kedusha is sort of a lighter kedusha. And here we have a machlokes. Rabbi Lezer says the only way to transfer that kedusha further is by way of transaction. We don't differentiate between the first pri and the second pri. Shvius by definition is an inherent kedusha, which cannot be transferred freely, whereas Rabbi Yehuda maintains no. Once it's a Fri Sheni, it's an applied kedusha and it can be transferred derech chilul as well. Rabbi Yehuda Mazaka established two takonis. We shake the lulav throughout all 7 days, even though we're outside the Beis HaMikdash. Number two, we must refrain from Chadash the entire 16th day of Nisan. That takes us to the topic of Chadash. We have a pasuk which says, Ad etzem hayom, pasuk which says, until the Eimer is brought. Well, it depends. During the Mikdash, until the Eimer. No Mikdash, well then, the Chacham say, once the 16th day arrives, you're okay. The Reader says the entire day is us. What was Rabbi Yehuda Mazaka's takana? Well, according to Chachamim, although it's mutter nowadays, but he maintained the Isser just in case the Beis HaMikdash would be built at the last minute, in which case the Eimer would be brought only late in the day. So he says, better refrain from Chodesh the entire day. According to the second approach of the Gemara, he was following Rabbi Yehuda Shita. And the entire day is us. That's all he came to say. After the Mikdash was destroyed, you have to refrain from Chodesh the entire day. We learned that the first day of Sukkot is a din of Lokachtam Lochem, has to be yours. Yours, even through a matana, Amanas Lahachser, is also considered yours. Holding a load during Tefillah is Asa Bar Lulav is mutter. We see Gamliel spent so much money on his lulav, and the Anshe Yerushalayim, who kept a lulav with them the entire day. So we see how much mitzvah was chavev to them, how much zrizas they applied to the mitzvah performance. Kol tov to you and atzlacha rabba.